We will start with showing a short video that was a product of the fellows this year, and then we will start the panel on young people and what can we do to promote change.
The devastating recent events in Israel and Palestine have reiterated the failure of the existing paradigms. Israeli officials have often used the phrase managing the conflict in order to describe what their policy has been for the past decade, a system in which Israel has been the sole sovereign between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. The recent escalation has highlighted that Israel's regime of occupation not only oppresses Palestinians, but endangers Israel's own citizens. For the first time in decades, Palestine is back at the forefront of the international agenda. No longer can the political will of powerful states continue to stifle the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people.
Achieving justice also requires international intervention, where state and non-state actors actively encourage de-escalation, hold Hamas and Israel accountable to international law, and address the root causes of this violence.
Now the misconceptions have fallen. It's now time to change the paradigm. There can be no just solution without an independent Palestinian state in which the Palestinian people are able to live in security and shape their own future.
Let's not wait for the next war. Let's recognize Palestine now.
Thank you very much. More on the letter writing initiative to candidates later on. I will present myself. My name is Matan Rosenstrauch, and I am the coordinator of the Peace Advocacy Fellowship. On a personal note, I would say that I'm Israeli. I have close family members who were affected and lost friends in the attack of Hamas on October 7th. This has caused me a lot of pain, but also strengthened the understanding that there can be no military solution to the conflict, but only a political one that we should work towards. I'm honored for 5 years now to coordinate the fellowship with my colleagues Martha and John, who are here today. And for those who don't know, the idea of the fellowship is to bring young people and bring them provide them with tools, knowledge, and capacities to become peace advocates, and they work on projects that they plan together with us on advocacy and education throughout the academic year. And one of the interesting aspects of the fellowship is the diversity. We have internationals every year. We have young people of Jewish diaspora, of Palestinian diaspora, and we are all working together. You will present yourselves. We have today with us Adrian, Kira, and Lily. And I'm asking for each of you, please, to explain, tell a little bit about your background, explain why you joined the Balfour Project Fellowship, and tell a little bit about which activism or advocacy work you were involved with this year, and maybe mention 1 or 2 challenges that you faced. So would you like to start, Kira?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. My name is Kira. I've just finished my undergraduate degree at Durham doing geopolitics, and next year I will be going to Georgetown to continue doing a master's in Arab studies. I joined this year and primarily focused on the Settler Violence in Area C project, which started last year but was then reorganized, and we, alongside Lara, myself, and another fellow called Jasmine, helped organize the tour of Oda Nazal, the mayor of Musafiyata and political activist, to the UK, primarily in Westminster, but also traveling up to Durham to do a student talk there. The primary reason why I chose to join the Balfour Project was a combination of 2 parts. So firstly, I was greatly privileged to do a variety of academic work in my undergrad degree, focusing on settler violence and Israel-Palestine. And secondly, because my maternal family are Palestinian. And whilst it's been very difficult for my family to be open up about being Palestinian, through academics, I was able to do more work into my family's background and some of the consequences they faced as a result of losing their home in Haifa, and combining that kind of personal connection to Palestine with also tangible change.
Thank you very much. You also were mentioning a little bit about the concept of shame and the importance of being a Palestinian diaspora when you do this kind of work. Maybe you can say a bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So something that I've tried to speak about a lot this year is a general conception that Palestinians have a very firm sense of identity, and it's something that a lot of them are very proud of, and it's no shame to be. But I think lesser understood by maybe the Western world is the concept of shame amongst Palestinian diaspora. So I would say part of the reason that it was not a concept I spoke a lot about at home when I was younger is my family felt embarrassment for having left and starting a new life, creating an identity that was built around other parts. They moved to Canada and kind of assimilated there and stopped speaking Arabic at home, stopped practicing Islam within their family, which is a personal decision, but also we've reflected and said in some ways you also contribute to the loss of Palestinian identity across the world. And in that way, you kind of contribute to the erasure of Palestinian people. So it's been really important for me and my family, now that we have kind of settled and feel comfortable, for myself to use my voice and in some ways my privilege to come back and do meaningful work in the space.
Thank you very much for sharing this. We all have been following the students' protest in the US and also here in the UK, and we have a privilege to have Adrian, who has been involved in students' protests both in Amsterdam University and at Oxford. So maybe present yourself and share with us your experience.
Yes, I'm Adrian. I grew up in Germany. I have recently completed my PhD at Oxford in political theory, so I'm transitioning out of the student status. It was nevertheless a pleasure to be part of this student group at the Balfour project. I've spent the last year lecturing in Amsterdam. I will now move to Oxford again, lecturing in the philosophy department. I had previously been engaged with the UN Department of Palestinian Rights, and I've been also working with Al-Haq, the international law advocacy and NGO in Ramallah. So I've been previously exposed to a lot of different narratives. I've been exposed to West Bank narratives through my work at Al-Haq. I've been exposed to the international narrative or the perspective of global institutions such as the United Nations. And I did, of course, know from my German background the discourse in Germany. I think what attracted me to join the Balfour project for the last academic year was the opportunity to acquaint myself with the narratives and the discussion, the narrative space in the UK, to better understand what are the voices within the UK, how do they compare to what I've learned about people in the West Bank or had these first-hand experiences in the West Bank. Also, how does it compare to the narrative space within Germany? So that was very insightful. I might need to mention that I was an associate fellow this year. I think there's something that the Balfour project started this year. That means I wasn't involved in any of the concrete projects. I was benefiting from all of the fantastic opportunities that came through with the project. So I was a fellow traveler, a satellite in some sense, but it was a fantastic year.
Can you tell us a little bit about the students' protest? How did you play part as a staff member in those universities? How you negotiated with the students? What they have demanded? What was your thoughts on those demands, etc.?
Yes, so yeah, maybe it's a great opportunity to reflect on what you've all probably have heard and learned about the student protests. Perhaps it will satisfy some of the demands that we've heard previously about please have some concrete action plans, some concrete demands that we want to put forward and discuss. The student protests throughout the globe, in the UK, in the US, I was in Amsterdam last year, pretty much had very concrete demands, concrete objectives, working behind and motivating the encampments, the protests that we saw around the globe, all of the advocacy that came from the student body. So I was involved, or I was part of the student protest, both in Oxford and Amsterdam, more so in Amsterdam throughout the last couple of months. And perhaps you've heard that some of it was fairly violent, disruptive. The students went as far as resorting to property damage to get the demands heard and listened to. Whether that was productive or not, I think that's up for debate. But one of the demands that was widely discussed was, of course, boycotting, sanctioning, and divesting from Israeli institutions. So in the context of Amsterdam, the student demand was to, first of all, disclose all of the ties that the University of Amsterdam has with Israeli institutions, both academic, educational institutions, and the arms industry, perhaps. This first demand was not met, aggravated by that the students took onto the streets and the campus, encamped, protested, putting up blockades, trying to disrupt the educational space. More or less, with more or less, in a more or less fruitful way. I think what happened in the aftermath was much more fruitful and might lead to some positive change in how we view something like a boycotted demand. So what we've come up with together with the students, the staff and the students at the University of Amsterdam, was to critically renegotiate the program of BDS, boycotting, divesting, sanctioning Israeli institutions. We've come up with a very concrete proposal that we've put forward to both the board of Oxford University and Amsterdam University to downplay what is commonly considered the BDS demand, which is the blanket divestment and sanctioning of Israeli academic institutions. This is something that we have, that we want to distance ourselves from. I think within the academic community, there's been recognition that within Israeli institutions, a blanket boycott would have negative consequences on the progressive, on the radical voices within Israeli academia, and therefore a blanket boycott would only just hurt. So the concrete policy proposal that we came up with through these discussions with the students and in debates with the respective boards of these universities is an ethical review process. So if we were to go through with the respective boards of the universities, we will have an ethical review of all further investments and all further cooperations with Israeli educational and other institutions, where a dedicated ethical board will discuss and negotiate the ethical dimensions of any investment and cooperation.
Okay, thank you for sharing this with us. Over to my left, we have Lily, who has been also an associate fellow, but has been involved above and beyond in so many aspects of the project and initiative that we worked on. So over to you, Lily. Tell us about your background, why you joined, and a little bit about the work you have done this year.
My name's Lily. I studied my undergraduate degree in Arabic, and I'm currently doing a master's at SOAS in international law. I joined the Balfour project because I'd studied sort of the Middle East from a very academic perspective, but never really had any personal involvement or any personal connection, really, unlike others who have joined the charity. But I always felt that the vision of the Balfour project really resonates with my own ideas about responsibility of the UK in the Middle East and in Israel-Palestine specifically. And I also think that the Balfour project, being so close to home, feels like it's a tangible you can really contribute to change even when it feels quite far away. And the last thing I would say is that about joining the project is I've always thought it's quite important to raise awareness about Britain's role, because people don't really know, especially, I mean, growing up, I had no idea about sort of the Israel-Palestine conflict and how the UK was so involved in that historically. And in terms of experience on the programme, I worked on 3 projects, as Matan mentioned, the TikTok project, which for those who don't know is a social media platform. So we've been making short educational videos on that, responding to sort of current events. We did a video on the World Court hearings for the genocide case. We did videos on the other case about the legality of the Israeli occupation, and just generally news, recognition of Palestine, that sort of thing. And the other project I worked on was the Recognise Palestine campaign, in which we were drafting letters to be sent out to the public, to send onto their MPs and sign, to encourage the UK to recognise Palestine. And lastly was the Israeli arms suspension campaign, which is ongoing and which we hope will carry on into the next year.
Yeah, and just to say that the arms suspension project is a project that came throughout the academic year from one of the other fellows as an initiative. It was assessed by EXCO and they accepted, and that's a really good example of how young people bring change and progression also in the work of charities. So we're coming quite to an end. It's a short panel, but I want you to tell maybe briefly 1 or 2 messages for young people out there. What is your message? How can you work towards change from our place here in the UK? Do you want to start?
Yeah, of course. I would say my primary message to young people would be, well, first of all, one of kind of gratitude, because I think this year we've really seen young people look at the cause of Israel-Palestine with like a critical eye, but also like a very genuine interest and a committed interest, which has been really wonderful, especially in regards to things like writing to MP. Young people have really shown their voices. One thing that I would say to young people now is it's very easy to share an image on your social media or to do things that don't, where your face isn't necessarily attached. But I think some of the most important things we can do is having tangible conversations in your social circles, at university, with your family. That's really important. So not just using social media where it can feel like you don't have to own up to the opinions you're putting out, but to follow up those conversations in real life, because I think young people do have an interest and they have an excellent voice. So to continue on that stream.
Thank you very much. Lily?
Yeah, I would really echo what Kira said. I think there's often a lot of fear and nervousness about talking about Israel and Palestine, especially young people maybe feel like they don't have all the answers, they don't know everything about a conflict, about the conflict, or maybe they feel that they have to pick a side. And that was something I was always quite afraid of growing up, is, if I, express support for one side, am I, then denying, the rights or respect for the other side. So I would say just to recognise and really promote the idea that calling for justice and equality and security for all people isn't picking a side. And you don't have to have all the answers and you don't have to know absolutely everything. It is complicated, but it's also not that complicated. And just don't be afraid to use your voice.
Thank you very much. That's really inspiring to hear. And Adrian, from what you've learned from the student protest, the kind of background of people who were active, we were discussing this, what you would wish, what kind of people you would wish to see in taking part in those protests. What would be your message to young people?
yeah, echoing and picking up on what both of you said, I would like to see young people, me included, of course, not mistaking political tribalism for advocating for a cause. That means that a political cause should not be speaking up for a political cause should not be mistaken for forming in-group alliances, taking up a certain standpoint within one's friendship group, taking up a certain standpoint within one's radicalized student body or not so radicalized student body. It's about debate, it is about engagement, it's about listening to one another, it is about discourse, it is about educating yourself, having a critical perspective on all of the narratives that we are confronted with, and then at some point formulating one's own position and not being afraid to, even if it's hard, to step outside of the political tribe that otherwise you might want to associate ourselves to.
Thank you very much. You are all invited in the reception to come and speak to us and hear more about their experience during the fellowship. And now, without further ado, I would like to hand on to Sir Vincent Finn.